to the 20th Japanniversary special today. This week, actually yesterday, is my 20th anniversary in Japan. I thought about doing a stream last night, but it turned out that yes, I was. Oh, by the way, the comments not showing through. That is annoying. That is annoying if it doesn't do that. Did that update just break that? That is really frustrating if that is not working. Let me just double check. It looks like the comments are not loading. Which isn't. Oh, there it is. Okay, there is stuff there. That is good to see. That is a relief. Boom! Welcome everybody to the 20th Japanniversary special of this show of Tokyo Tonight 2 or Tokyo Tonight. Let me just adjust the screen. It's all different now. So yeah, I've just had Streamlabs OBS updating. I posted a few photos and stuff tonight. Just thought I'd see if I could find something interesting, especially from the old days. So thank you to everybody. Thank you TechArt2, good to see you. And thank you all for all of the greetings and whatnot. Let's check who is in here. Yeah, it's always a tight schedule in the evenings. We've got Bull Bill, It's Boy, the J-Vlog. We've also got Mario Lagos. Good evening. We've got the J-Vlog, Tai Nakamura. Good to see you. You've been in the studio mixing up music, but now you're really glad to hear that you've been mixing music. Can't wait to hear that. We've got Sergeant Bilko, James Kelly. Woo, indeed. We've got Dan H, Sergeant Bilko, I think I said. Quinn Ranked of Tokyo 503, Dan H. We've got Mr. Cordy Champ, Dan H again. James Kelly, I think I've already said. Nissan R33 Zenjun, good to see you. Tech Art, who I said hello to just before. And Kang and Kodos. Lauren Sakai, awesome to see you. Thank you for the congratulations. And we are all caught up now. Anyway, great to see you all. So yeah, I've got the normal topics. Not a lot of topics, but a few topics for tonight. But I thought I'd just reflect. Why not reflect? I arrived on this stint in Japan. I've actually been in Japan for longer than 20 years, because of course I came to Japan first in 1991 as a high school student, or a New Zealand high school student. And then I came here in 1995 backpacking, and then I came here in 1998 as a working holiday during my summer vacation in New Zealand, where I taught English and I worked at a patent law firm for free during the day. And then I came in 1999 on March 23, a week before I was going to start work at my first real job as a salaryman after graduating. And although I must admit, I don't know that I was thinking I was going to stay here for 20 years. I was thinking it'd be really cool if I can connect this to jobs that might take me to America or do something else, or at least for a time, and then maybe come back to Japan and be connected to Japan. Don't think I had a vision necessarily of being here non-stop for 20 years, but it's been a good run, and yes, that's been fun. So I've posted some photos. And yes, indeed, Bull Billet's Boy since 91. Yeah, well, school exchange in 91, of course. So yes, Bodycon was still here. We're still just at the end of the bubble there. So I'm glad that I made that. Kang and Kodos, you just made your first 2 months here. Well, that's actually a big deal, because as I guess if I go through the whole thing, I can tell you the first year and then the first 3 years are definitely the most memorable. That is when the most stuff will happen, and you'll be going through, and actually for all of the ups and downs and the roller coaster that those first 3 years in particular represent, they are still, like, for me, the time whenever I think back, they're what I remember the most. So yes, Bull Billet's Boy. I never went to Juliana's, but I did DJ parties at the club that Juliana's became. It wasn't called Venus, it was called something like that. What was it called again? It was quite a big club, right? No, yeah, I've DJ'd it a couple of times, but not when they had all the fans and everything. So no, I'm afraid looks like you got to have it more fun when it was more fun than when I went there. But yes, so yeah, I posted some photos. I've got some stuff to talk about. Let me quickly just take a pause here. In fact, how do I do that? I do this. So how shall I do this? I've got some updates, I've got some news stories, and I've got the looking back at 20 years. I guess the looking back at 20 years part is going to be the main part of the video. Let me do the updates first. Let's get those out of the way. First thing is that, again, I've just had such a busy week. I mean, I'm always busy, but I had a really busy week, so I went back to the final episode of Japan Business Time for this series. I actually didn't get around to posting last week. So I've set it for, because my father is coming to Japan on Wednesday night, I'm not going to do it Wednesday night. I'm posting the final episode of this season, which I think is actually the 4th season of Japan Business Time with Rochelle Kopp. That is going to be this Tuesday evening at 10:30 p.m. And if you want to watch that live with me in the comments, I'll have it premiering on Tuesday evening. So look out for that Tuesday morning if you're in the US or in the UK or somewhere like that. So that will be a lot of fun. Also, actually, Rochelle pinged me the other day. If you are in Tokyo, you may have heard that Rochelle, you know what, I should have put that somewhere in this. I've retweeted it a couple of times, but Rochelle has actually published a new book in Japanese. It's like a manga-based book for Japanese people on how to work with foreigners, i.e. with foreigners in your workplace, how to not be like total dicks, which is pretty much what my first 7 or so years in Japan was. I was pretty much the subject, probably, of that manga. She's actually doing she's been invited to a talking event associated with the launch of her book, where someone, they needed a last minute replacement on April the 5th, and I raised my hand, and I will be at that as a speaker. I'll be one of the panelists anyway. I'll probably have to suppress the urge to speak the entire time as a replacement panelist. But you know, I can't hold back when I start, so I've got that coming up. I'll be sharing details about that in the coming days. Whatnot, so follow my Twitter and maybe my Facebook if you're interested in Tokyo and available for that. In terms of MyChan TV, what's going on? The payment setup works, the new functionality works. I actually did something really exciting. I discovered on Fiverr a wee while ago these ads for making explainer videos, and I put together a detailed explanation of what I wanted just about the site, just to sort of start getting some traffic to it. And yeah, I've just I thought I'd try out, put a little bit of money down and try to get a decent explainer video sort of made in a fun sort of a style. And I just got a storyboard back yesterday, and it was really cool. So I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes back from that. So I'm going to get the UI designer to look at the pro screen, the pro join, becoming a pro user if you want to do that screen and make that look pretty. But again, I think I said 2 weeks ago that I said about a week ago that we're 2 weeks away, and I think we're probably about 1 to 2 weeks away right now. Just getting it's all tidied up and working, but that is all looking good. Hey, Andrea Moboy, good to see you. So yeah, lots of different things going on. Another thing that is very cool that I'll give a yes, thank you, Andrea. Indeed, it's kind of crazy to be having a Japanniversary. Someone actually said, where is the party? Oh, that's another thing, of course, the party. The best party would obviously be the Hanami, which I wish I could be at next week, but of course my dad is visiting and I'm taking him to Hakone on that day. I think I'm going to be exhausted, but I am going to get out and I will make probably a late appearance. Like, given the time we're coming back to Tokyo, it'll be like after 9 p.m. and Hanami starts in the morning and everyone's going to be exhausted and I'm going to be exhausted. But I'm going to be at the after party to the Hanami, and if anyone is still conscious and around at that time, and if it's possible to find out where you guys are, I'll probably try to find out where Victor is, and I will be there, so we'll have a quasi party, I guess, and it'll be good to see you guys. So yes, Dan H is just commenting here, here's you money back. My friend got me a refund on YouTube Super Chats without having access to my work payment method, but I gave him my email address and some number. It looked like he got me a refund, so have the money back. I don't understand what that means. Dan H. And by the way, please, the super chat, well, I appreciate the super chats, and it's all being put towards the good cause of the projects that I'm doing, but I don't know exactly what that means, but there you go. If you got a refund on super chats without having to access your payment method, anyway, thank you for that. I'm sorry, I wish I could understand that question better. Of course, if you have a super chat, I will jump straight to it. Please clarify if there's anything that I didn't get, but yes. Andrea Moboy, yes, about Christchurch, I guess I could talk a little bit more about that. I haven't tweeted much about it, honestly, for the same reason, pretty much as the Prime Minister said. I want to show respect to the victims. I want to not, frankly, play up. I think there's two elements to this. One, I don't want to give any publicity to the person who did this purely for it. Maybe I'll just say one thing which I've said last week. The person seems to me to fit the profile of what you quite often hear about there's people who I interact with on the internet who I wouldn't consider necessarily full white supremacists, but people who subscribe to ideas that are the underpinnings of things that white supremacists believe. And not only that, but well, I don't know for a fact that this person was necessarily an incel either, but I find there's a high degree of overlap between the sorts of frustrations and the sorts of things that come out from this event, or from the bad person from this event, and those sorts of ideas. And you know, there's never multiple cases where this has actually led to terrorism. So as far as I'm concerned, those ideas, although I am pretty tolerant of ideas, I mean, I like challenging. You know, I enjoy discussion. But my view is just I guess as a general comment, is that I'm not going to have patience or tolerance for people with those cutting and pasting those sorts of views here anymore. As far as I'm concerned, that's the same as pasting ISIS propaganda now. That's what it is for me. Not many people do it, and I, as you guys know, I offer multiple strikes. I'm pretty patient, but you know, that's really the main thing about that. And in terms of Christchurch, look, I think New Zealand is pulling together really well. I'm proud of the way that we're reacting. The things I don't like about the way that New Zealand are reacting are the sense that when they say this isn't us, there seems to be relief that it was an Australian almost, which I think is irrelevant. New Zealand has mass shooters, and New Zealand has people that subscribe to this, and we shouldn't feel like we're absolved by the fact that it was an immigrant, ironically, that did this. So yeah, on the Christchurch stuff, I also think the gun reforms, of course, are great. Again, I see people saying, see, we're better than America. I don't think that's the case at all. We had the chance to do the same law reforms 10 years ago, and we didn't do it because the gun lobby in New Zealand stopped it. We had an opportunity. We should have done this after the Port Arthur Australian case, which is when we tried to do it. So, you know, all of that said, I think New Zealand's doing good things. Politically, I'm not actually a supporter of the Prime Minister or the current government, but I've got to say, she's doing such a good job. Hell, she's probably going to get my vote in the next election. So yeah, that's pretty much it for that. I do have family in Christchurch. I know what a profound impact it's going to have on the city for a long time, and it's, you know, but that said, I'm glad to see the way the society's pulling together. So yes, that is that. Oh, I see. So Dan H is just explaining the comment above. The super chat system is actually broken, that you can claim back the money on it. Well, which is fair enough, and no skin off my nose either way. But you know, what can we do? Kimbiko, thank you for the comment there, and yeah, let's talk about 20 years. So I'll put some photos on tonight, which will be fun. These are a little bit in reverse order, so let me go to the photos, and we'll do it in the order that I meant to show it. So this is from my very first night in Japan. I went and found these in a photo album, and I just took a photo with the iPhone tonight. 15 years old. That is me with hair at the table. I was struggling with the sushi, so they brought out some karage there partway through. I remember this distinctly, that there's a dictionary there you can see on the table beside me, not looking very good. I thought no one was looking at that moment, because they insisted on keeping on translating every piece of sushi, and that was the first time I ever ate sushi. The first time I ever had Japanese food was that first night, and I found it just psychologically tough. I mean, now some of the things that I struggled with the most, like uni, like sea urchin, are the things that I now enjoy the most. But at that time that was pretty tough. But you can see that 1991, May 25, in Fukuoka, fantastic host family, really took good care of me, and it's pretty much, I started out, when I learned Japanese, I was really interested in Chinese. But yeah, and Mr. Korichep, I was pretty much about to gag. That was pretty much it. Perk, good to see you, and yay, welcome to the live show. This is the good thing about being on the live show, is you get to say hello, and I can say hello back to you, so there you go. So yes, the really started with, I wanted to learn Chinese. I lived in Singapore, I lived in a very Chinese neighborhood. There was no way to learn Chinese in New Zealand at that time. There is now. It's actually more popular than Japanese right now, but as a substitute for Chinese, I learned Japanese. I wasn't very good at it, but I went on a school trip to Fukuoka, and I came to like it. This family were so good, I had such a great time, that I invested on learning Japanese after that, and it became, well, pretty much my life, as you can see. In 1998, I came on a working holiday visa for 3 months. I actually worked for free. I wanted to summer clerk, and I was aware that I probably wouldn't be able to do anything because my language wasn't up to it. So I, through a law firm connection in New Zealand, I found the partner law firm in Japan, and I asked them to just let me sit there. And I would teach English at nights to pay for my food and my transport. I was staying at my girlfriend's house at the time then. And I worked every day, and I actually did some okay work, and they did actually pay me at the end of it, and they were very, very nice. And that was a case where I was consciously investing. I wanted that experience. I didn't want to be a burden. I basically wanted to exceed expectations, and I set expectations to 0, thinking ahead, and it worked out really well for me. My eyes are really red in this photo, and I don't remember why. I think I was having hay fever or something at that time. It was, I get hay fever at the end of the year. But yeah, 1991, man, the computer was basically like a word processor. It was horrible. Everything was file based, and I was just given these files which I had to just read through and figure out. These were patent lawsuits or trademark lawsuits. Actually, they're mostly trademarks overseas, and it was a fun job actually, and it was a great experience, and it got me my foot in the door for when I came back to Japan. I actually came back to Japan at the end of 1999. And I went to a bunch of job fairs, and that's when I got the job interview that led to my first job, which brought me to Japan just before the start of the Japanese business year in April. So that's where the anniversary is now. Hey Bradley Ford, good to see you, and thank you for the good hair, such as it was. And yes, and thank you to your wife for the congratulations as well. So yeah, while I was in New Zealand preparing to come to Japan, I was actually living in an apartment with lots of Japanese and actually Chinese. Some of the people in this photo are Chinese as well, but they all spoke Japanese, and I was pretty much speaking Japanese every day at home. As you can see, I actually had no problems back there. In terms of beard, I actually had a red beard. It's a funny thing, when you're blonde you get kind of reddish beards. It was kind of cool actually. I had it growing out for a while actually. When I was at college, I actually had long hair and the goatee at college. Not anymore, but that's okay. My first job in '99. This is the class photo. There were trainers from overseas, but pretty much it was me. I wasn't actually the only non-Japanese here. There was a Nikkei American guy, but of course he blended in. So in this photo, these were all my doki, and that's me. It's a photo of me way in above my head. I could speak Japanese very well, but I signed up for a job basically and I asked for them to make it as hardcore for me as possible, and the end result of that was that I was sent out to the countryside to a place where I had to wear these. Oh, you know what? I attached 2 photos to this tweet. I wonder if I could. And there was one of me anyway as well, wearing that same kind of uniform. I had to sit at this desk basically for 2 years in this room. This was a prefabricated building which was too hot in summer, too cold in winter, in Noda City in Chiba, in a silicon wafer factory. We had to wear these factory uniforms. The desks were too low and my knees would always bang on the desk every morning. The seats were like folding sort of school chairs. They were horrible. Elbows were banging against everybody. It was hardcore. It was pretty tough, and the bosses were tough. Again, it was a kind of a hazing growth experience. My second job, 2002, I actually joined a sort of very traditional Japanese company. Again, in Twitter, I attached a series of photos. So there's another photo that shows the sort of atmosphere of the office, but again, I was the only Gaijin in the company, and yeah, everyone was sort of in uniforms, and yes, that was still with a little bit of hair back then, and that was doing consulting policy research, but it was inside an insurance company. And someone asked, was that the company where I got my law degree? And I asked him if the legal department, and the boss said no, so I left, and that is correct. But that said, it was a great job. It was a very traditional, very conservative company, but it was, it was it was a really fun job, and it was just that I felt like I needed progression, and I chased that, and that's what led me to a law firm the next year. I actually didn't have much time this evening to post photos. Fuji Rock I went to nearly every year. I had some friends from work that I went to, and yeah, had a lot of fun with those. I also used to go DJ a lot of parties. This was actually by Tamagawa River. We got a generator, we got a whole bunch of people and some food. Actually had a really, really good party. So had a bunch of really good parties back then. I got invited one time through, I don't even remember what the connection was, but somebody said, hey, you want to be a movie extra? And I think that's me pulling a funny face at the back. But that was fun. I actually got a photo again. I posted multiple photos on Twitter of me as a World War II or post-World War II occupation era GI. Got to be in a racist bar fight. That was kind of fun. I started playing rugby. That was, I think, after my very first game, playing rugby on an all mud and dirt ground, and just dead with exhaustion, but I did that for a number of years. this was fun. Yeah, I used to have friends from my first job actually who were like architects, and so they knew a lot of these places, these sort of houses that were under construction, and they would make them available for parties. This one we had, we like filled up a bathtub with water, and again I DJed with some of my friends, and we would play drum and bass music, and it was sweet. The rugby team was a French rugby team, so we had parties with those guys there, and that's pretty much I think all that I had posted up until that point. There's more stuff obviously after this. There's the surfing, maybe going through the story of going through my 20 years in Japan. So when I came to Japan, I was planning to get married. I lived with a Japanese girlfriend in New Zealand for about 3 or 4 years, and yeah, I was 23 years old at the time, so obviously way too young for that, but still planning that. Came to Japan. So in that first year, I had a really tough job. I mean, I spent 3 years in America, programming camp, IT consulting camp, coming back to Japan, going to the middle of nowhere. But right before that, yeah, it turned out that my girlfriend, who it was all for the better and the best in the end of the day, but yeah, she broke up. She wanted to go date her boss. That was fine. So I went through basically in that first 6 months in Japan. One, I had all this adrenaline and the high that I'm finally here and I'm finally living the dream, and then I had these things all happen at once. Breaking up with the girlfriend who I lived with for a number of years, so that was quite harsh. I never had anything like that up to that point in my life, plus discovering that I'd bitten off way more than I could chew on this job. I mean, I suffered. I was terrible at this job, and it really took like all of those 3 years that I was there. I actually did get up to where I was getting good, well, not good, I was getting average evaluations, but from bad evaluations. But it was I had no choice, right? It was pure survival. I was trying to come up from, and I always figured it was the situation where it's like you know, it's like training with depriving yourself of oxygen. I was depriving myself of English and gaijin-ness, and I was just forcing myself to become a Japanese salaryman, and it worked. I got those extra muscles from making it extra hard on myself. But I went through a lot of stress actually in that first year, and as much as I like to also joke about how my girlfriend breaking up with me was like the best thing that ever happened, because I had a very good single life in Japan. After that, it was like a year before I could get into that, and when I did, of course, it was great. But yeah, and what really I still think pulled me out, I've said this before, but what pulled me out of the hole a little bit at that time, where I was a bit, you know, and it was funny, I mean, I was in depression, and it was a situation where it was weird because I had energy. I was still new in Japan. I was still like, you know, every day I'm going to turn this around, and I still had that energy to draw on what you have when you're new in Japan. But at the same time, just kept hitting walls, and those walls were just the circumstances that I just couldn't change. That I was just in a really tough situation with the job. I was in a really tough situation I didn't know how to deal with my personal life, and I lost contact with all my friends as a result of that, so I was very isolated. And you're just sort of in a hole, and you're just trying, and I was trying to think my way out of it, and you just couldn't, right? Because you're just stuck there. What pulled me out of it was I realized that my health was going, and I was just like, I was in a bad place, and I had to do something. So I started going to the gym. At the gym, I made friends who were surfers. Those guys took me out surfing. And in the middle of winter, it was snowing the first day I went out surfing, which in itself was kind of a shock. But I tell you, that kind of shock of going into the ocean and going surfing in the snow, yeah, that was kind of a thing. That was kind of therapeutic. And I must admit, you know, when there's a thing about, again, that in itself became like a survival situation. I wasn't fit enough to be out in heavy surf in snow, you know, freezing cold in winter, and you know, I was getting cramps, and I was in a bad situation. But it kind of reset everything. Like going to the beach every weekend just helped to put everything in perspective in a way. It helped to reset everything. So those friends that I had from surfing really, you know, and those guys were, for years, you know, they were like, every weekend I'd go surfing. I'd go surfing as much because I felt like these guys saved my life as anything else. So that was a really big thing. So, and surfing in Japan is excellent, by the way. Then with the second job, yeah, back then, you know, I mean, like, mobile phones were brand new. Internet itself was only, you know, Netscape 2 when I came to Japan. You know, so it was kind of like when I had, but it was funny, the second job came about through a connection that happened through an internet chat site. At that time, that's when I started posting on the internet around 2001, and it came partly out of the fact I had no means of English communication with anybody. By my own design, I was in a situation that I couldn't talk to anybody in English, so I found a site about Japanese. Well, actually, it still is around today, Japan Today. It started in around the year 2000, and I was working in an environment by myself, so I started posting all the way back then. That's when I picked up the Hiko Simon name. I made some friends through that, including one who recommended me for that second job that you could see, which turned out to be a great gig. Yeah, it was around, I see from the photos, it was 2003. In my head I have it as being a bit later, like 5 or 6 years in, but it was like 4 years in. I think I got level 1 around that time, or close to around that time, and I started to meet more foreign people, and I started to get a little bit more comfortable that I was doing okay by that point. And I started to play rugby for a French rugby club, which was another thing that I felt like really changed my life a lot in terms of, again, I was in a position that I could help a lot of people by that point. I was pretty well adjusted to Japan, and I could help other people struggling with that. I also, coming from New Zealand, I knew rugby fairly well, even though I hadn't played it competitively there. I know the rules. I know I know how the game works. So I love playing. I played, probably about 10 years. I played rugby for that French rugby club and had a lot of fun. And went from there to a law firm, American law firm. Thought I'd cash in with all that Japanese experience, and the very first thing that they did, I was there for like 6 months or less than 6 months, and they said, hey, we need a secondee for a really Japanese company to Fujitsu, and you're like an IT guy and you know Japanese companies, so we're going to send you to Fujitsu. And I was pretty much back in the same situation I was in my first job at a Japanese IT company again, do it as a lawyer, which is a little bit different, but I did that for a time, and then I came back, and I did the law thing for a few years, and that was actually really challenging. It's great to be in a company. One thing I learned from that, I always thought that, okay, now I've suffered all of these years trying to be Japanese and working like a Japanese person and doing all of that overtime and all of that, sometimes feels meaningless, hard work. And I was looking forward to going to a place that has values, that thinks like me, that thinks when the work is done, go home, that thinks, life is more important than, just working for the sake of your teammates and all this sort of stuff. And then I joined an American law firm, and I discovered that Americans, or at least the Americans I was working with, were maniacs. In terms of hey Andrew, my boy, sorry I missed you saying goodbye, but goodbye to you. I found that different to Japanese. I think Americans, at least the Americans I worked with, they worked as hard, they worked harder than the Japanese. And I think what really set them apart, and this is what makes the productivity different in a way, is that the Americans really work with purpose. They don't sit there for appearance's sake. They sit there because they love the job, and that's where I was. That's how people were. So I remember hoping I was going to get a break and I was going to get all the benefits of all the experience of working in Japanese companies for years and years, and I found, wow, the Americans actually blew me away even more. And I've been in American companies, or American quasi-Japanese, quasi-American companies since that law firm as well. But I remember being surprised that in a way it was a bigger culture shock working for Americans than it was working for Japanese, and I adjusted to that. The thing about that job that I really liked, the third job in Japan, was that I was working with people that were smarter than me. I really, that forced me to really stretch myself, and that's always a good thing, and that's what I did in my first job. Every job I've basically always felt a little bit like, oh geez, what if they find out? And that forces you to kind of make it real. You gotta step up, and I always really enjoyed that about each one of those jobs, and it's stretched me and it's put me into the positions where where I am, where I've gone now. My last two jobs where I've been a bit more senior. It's just part of age as well that you start to become a manager. 2006. I would like to show the photos from 2006, but there are specific ones. I didn't have time to post them. On consecutive days in Christchurch in 2006, on a Saturday, I got admitted to the bar in New Zealand. I became a lawyer. This as well as at my second job, and in New Zealand in those days it's just changed, but you still got to wear the wigs and the gowns that the British lawyers wear, so that was for me a really big deal. Japanese and Americans see it and they think it's ridiculous. To me, no, that's super cool. And the next day I got married in New Zealand and wore a Japanese hakama for that, so that was super awesome. And it was. And then 3 years later my son was born, so that was cool. He's turning 10 this year. That was another big life-changing thing. I guess the other big life-changing things that happened while I was in Japan, of course, I was here for 9/11. I was coming home from the gym one night, and I saw that on TV, and I stayed up all night watching that. Again, for the Indian Ocean tsunami, my dad was living in Phuket at the time, which was badly affected, although fortunately he was okay, but that was a worry. Then there was a Christchurch earthquake in 2011, which caused both my uncle and my grandmother to lose their houses. That was pretty bad, and again watching that online. And then here, huge earthquake, although Tokyo not as badly affected as anywhere else, but of course that was a big deal. 2011, that was I've always still considered that a dress rehearsal for what will eventually happen in Tokyo, but it was a pretty big event. Dan H commenting that it's not surprising, the productivity thing, given that Japan has the lowest productivity amongst developed nations. And that's an interesting rabbit hole as well that I can go down. This is one of the things I struggled with, the fact that it was there was this immense social pressure to not go home in my first job. I was sitting in that room in the crappy factory clothes at the desk, banging my knees on the desk, and I was stressed out that even when I got my work done, there was like no incentive to do it fast, because you just get new stuff. 7:30 at night, if you finish all your work and you get up to leave, manager would say, no, do this, or help him with his work, or whatever. That just would work out. You're just there from first train to last train every day. Shubas, glad that you made it. Buenos dias. Every day they just keep, last train. Originally we had to arrive at 7:30 in the morning, factory hours. They let us come in at like 8:30 later on, a bit later, but we'd go on to the last train, which was like midnight. And I had to work most weekends, most Saturdays, and on Sundays, the only day that I'd get off, I'd go to the beach. So I remember this is what I was really struggling with, apart from the fact it was just killing me, the length of the hours. And you get so tired that you slow down, you pace. It becomes like running a marathon. You pace yourself because it's pointless going too fast. And I would ask, why are we doing this? And, why I don't understand the logic of this. It's not logical to me. And my Nikkei friend, the other non-Japanese guy who was in the intake of that first job, he sort of told me that, best advice I've ever gotten, I've come back to it a bunch of times. Everyone is doing it because they're working in order to help one another, in order to sort of save each other. This idea that, you're there on a 2-year project, but if other people have work, that you've got to sit there and pitch in with them, and they'll pitch in with you, and if you're not seen to be pulling your weight, you've got to go, then that's not a good look. And so it's this idea that, he sort of explained the whole thing to me, which is a different set of values to pure productivity. He did remind me after that, remember, it's all bullshit. It doesn't mean that it's right. That just means that's what they're thinking, and you need to understand it and follow it while you're there. But please don't allow yourself to become brainwashed into accepting it. Hold on to what you know and what you think is right, which is something I've tried to do over the 20 years. I've tried to hold on to those aspects of New Zealand culture as well. The idea about trying to work, efficiently, quickly, get it done, leave. But over the years, it was probably the hardest part for me about working in Japanese companies. This idea that if you worked really hard and submitted something ahead of a deadline, it wouldn't get tossed back to you. The idea is that if you get a deadline, you to use all of the time, and you actually get penalized for productivity in Japan. That said, the flip side of that, Dan H, is that we do measure productivity about time, resources, and whatever. And you could look at Japan and you can see elevator attendance, and you can see car parking attendance in car parks, and you can see the amount of time for a great example that I've seen over the years is pharmaceutical companies. Pharmaceutical companies in Japan put enormous investment in, and they have a very low output of drugs that they put out. And I remember dealing with a case of an M&A of an overseas company that was acquired by a Japanese pharmaceutical company that wasn't aware of the sort of culture that Japan had. And it was this idea that in America, they've got this culture for pharmaceutical companies that if they are not putting out new drugs, then they're going to get cut. They've got to meet these targets for economic sort of for sellable, marketable drugs. The philosophy from Japanese companies was they were happy to spend the time and to eliminate 9 out of every 10 test drugs to make sure they were getting good drugs. And from that perspective, it means that they were, anyone who's been to a doctor in Japan knows that you'll get a ton of different types of drugs for anything that you go there for. But there's a philosophy in the pharmaceutical industry of prioritizing sort of lots of R&D and trying to get at what they think is right over trying to get something to market as quick as possible to get a better, to get better numbers over the ROI, over the return on investment. And I think that's something that you see throughout in Japan. Once the money is decided, people really don't focus on the money very much. In IT projects, they're always adding scope, they're always adding time, and the prices are usually fixed. So I would say what happens is that Japanese culture just doesn't put the same value on productivity as an absolute that you get in the West. And if you go to America, which does have high efficiency and does have high productivity, and you compare things like service and you compare things like quality of day-to-day stuff compared to Japan, when you're used to Japan, you look at the airlines, you look at it and you think, well, okay, maybe the US airlines, for example, are cheaper and they pack more people into those airplanes and they move more of them around, and maybe the Japanese airlines have less of productivity. But which airline do you want to fly on? And what does that say? Does that say that that's the right value, per se? Which isn't to say that the Japanese have it perfectly right either. But I must admit, one thing about living in Japan is it makes me think that the Western concept of productivity as an absolute is probably slightly mistaken. And there's a whole thing about Ishida Baigan that I've talked about before, about a Buddhist philosophy, about this idea of doing a job well and focusing on non-productivity, which is a really big thing during the Edo period when resources were limited in Japan. It's kind of a sustainability it wasn't intentionally ecological, but it's similar to sustainability economics, this idea of increasing value on the on the life of a product, making sure products can be used for a long time rather than the necessity to have products that use and throw away to get better return on what you're making, sort of thing. So Japan has terrible productivity, but it doesn't mean that it's necessarily all wrong, although there are certainly things that I think are wrong, and certainly you do spend a lot of time doing a lot of things, doing a lot of work sometimes that feels unnecessary a lot of the time. That is true. So and pretty much leading up to today, I mean, my life has become more quiet. I very much enjoy this YouTube thing, which I guess I started 10 years ago, maybe more than 10 years ago now. I haven't been counting. I probably had a 10th anniversary of this somewhere along the line. This is one of the pleasures that I get, just sharing, at least the insight that I've been able to gather over the years that I've been here. I really, really enjoy it as an outlet for pent-up creativity. I've always had a lot of energy and wanting to do extra things, sports. I've been coaching kids rugby. I like to do kickboxing. I've seen other people posting training videos of rock climbing and working out and so on. I find them quite fun to watch. And I thought, well, geez, I should check my own form anyway. So I've posted a few kickboxing videos on Facebook lately, just for laughs. But it's actually, I like to do that, and I really am enjoying what I'm doing with Tokyo Digital Crew. I'm really enjoying the outlet of MyChat TV and stuff like this. It keeps me sort of stimulated when I've got less ability to go out and do other things. But yeah, that's where I'm at, more or less. A pat on the back. Oh my God, what I would give for a pat. 20 years, pat on, how many pats on the back? I never had physical contact isn't really a thing here. I haven't had pats on the back. I've had a not totally terrible job, maybe that would have been the highest praise. Some aspects of the Karate Kid movie are not cliched. But yes, so anyway, that is 20 years in Japan. In terms of other stuff going on, as I mentioned, the final episode of Japan Business Time this week. Be there and be square. It's okay to be square. And Andy de Virgo, good to see you. By the way, welcome to the comments. I just noticed your name, and I don't think I've noticed your username before, so thank you for joining. Also, Sloppy Pastrami, Hakama and Lawyer Wig, please, I can dig them out. In fact, yeah, I can dig those out. Only thing is, I don't want to share other photos if I do that. If you give me a second, I can show you the 2006 photos. In fact, sure, I can do that. Hang on a sec. Okay, let me pull this out. 2006 February. So lawyer's wig, definitely got that. In fact, is there it was sure, I'll post one onto Twitter now, and then I will reshare it here. So give me a sec. I will accommodate that request, because this is kind of cool photos actually. Boom. 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 Here we go. also add, by popular request, me in a hakama, which I must admit I've always wanted an excuse to wear a hakama again, because those things are cool. In fact, where is it? Here we go. Boom. Oh, in fact, I can't find. Let me go back. Photos. Hang on a sec. I'll post the hakama one later. But it's in here somewhere. In fact, it's got to be here. I know the photo that I want, and it is not there. So anyway, I will come back to that. I'll post the lawyer's wig one anyway, because I quite like that. Emitted to the bar, boom, 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 boom. And I will flip that on the screen. So let me do that. Boom, 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 boom. And anyway, that's actually, yeah. The shirt wasn't properly pulled up there at the and that, but that's me when I was admitted as a lawyer. That's my dad and my mum and my stepfather. My stepfather's on the right. My mum and my dad is on the side there. So that's something for you. This is the problem with taking requests like this during the show. I did actually have here. Well, that was horses here, but I did indeed have some here. So yeah, it was kind of cool. For me, that was a big deal. Anyway, but yeah. So coming back, in terms of news this week, I'm just going to go through really rapidly through the show. But look, it's been a great 20 years, and what I've really found that I've enjoyed. I always like to joke how I was kind of like a real dick for the first like 5 to 7 years, where I was trying so hard to be Japanese, and then I sort of realized after about 5 years that one, I didn't have anything left to prove. Like, I spoke Japanese, pretty much, I became comfortable that I was pretty much always the best Japanese speaker in the room wherever I went, and I didn't have anything to prove anymore. And then I realized, man, I've been such a dick this whole time trying to get to this point, avoiding other foreigners and stuff like that. So I've really spent the last 15 years trying to make up for that through things like this, where I love just trying to help people avoid some of the hardship that I went through needlessly. And share what I love about this place. Being with Japan, it certainly is a marriage in itself. It's good and bad. You know, you basically learn to tolerate more than anything else. But it's kind of funny. In some ways, Japan has progressed enormously in the time that I've been here. I mean, it used to be all smoking. It used to be, you know, the society here has changed a lot in the time that I've been here by some measures. And yet, sometimes I leave here and I go overseas and I realize that where prices in Japan have been the same the whole 20 years. Inflation overseas, house prices, food prices have gone through the roof. I'm always shocked how expensive things have become, like in America and Australia and New Zealand. And I think through that, the quality of life in Japan, which used to be kind of terrible, you'd have the salary, which I don't think go this far. Now this, you know, you actually, I think, get pretty good value for money compared to living anywhere else, and that's made me increasingly comfortable living here for all of the problems that Japan has coming ahead. Thank you, Barry Bonds. Good to see you. What's up, indeed. I don't know the Australian lawyer character rake, but I'll take it, whatever it is. Yeah, Mr. Cordy Chap, in Australia they were expensive. I don't know. Look, when I left in the 1990s, petrol in Australia was like 40 cents a litre. You might not remember that. And it was less than $1 a litre in New Zealand. Food in New Zealand was like water. So long as you weren't buying sauces, if you were just buying meat and vegetables, it cost nothing. When I was a student, my weekly food shopping supermarket budget for cooking for myself was, geez, I could get by on less than $30 a week for food. My rent as well, I paid like, geez, back in those days, I was paying like $40 a week. you know, $320 a month for a pretty good room in a big house. So I don't know. Houses when I left in Auckland were like on average were about $350,000. Now they're nearly $1 million. So kind of crazy. Musashi Mark, thank you for that. Good to see. Indeed, a consumer butter index is exactly what we need. Okay, there are now 6 minutes left. I'm going to go through the whole 1 hour of topics now in the remaining time. First of all, Patreon. I'm going to use YouTube memberships. I think I'm going to use that as a supplement for people who don't want to necessarily pay for my Chan TV, but they do want to support that and the other projects that I'm doing. I'm going to use YouTube memberships, but for those people who use Patreon, which a lot of YouTubers do, they are bringing out a new model for it, so that's going to be really interesting. By the way, that does remind me, Tokyo Digital Crew is coming back. Well, I've mentioned this before. We've started work and we've actually made some solid ground on some projects, and there's going to be some very, very cool stuff coming out, all going to plan in the next few weeks as well. So that's another thing to look forward to. And we're probably going to get some of the music stuff for people who enjoy that going on that separate YouTube channel again, so that's good. I posted this because I noticed some comments on this video, the collab video I made 4 years ago during that big happy boom. It was a little bit late at the time, and I must admit someone posted a comment just saying this video is really, really fun, this is really great, and it made me watch the video again for the first time in years. And it's really good, and it's aged really well. The people who are in this video, like some of these people were like new YouTubers at the time, or I barely knew, and now I know them quite well. And I must admit, I watched this video for the first time in a while, and it's pretty much got like everybody in Japan YouTube that's around now, and it came out really awesome. So I must admit, if you haven't noticed it, it's on the top of my YouTube channel anyway. I've got it pegged for people who are not subscribers. But check it out. It's a really good video. It was a lot of fun to make, and I should do something like this again. We've got I'm distracted by the comments here. Who is leaving us for good this week? I am not leaving. I didn't say that, and Andy DeVergo, don't worry about that. I'm still here. But yes. So yeah, here is Rochelle's book, which actually I just ordered yesterday, but it's aimed at Japanese people, but it's basically Manga de wakaru gaikokujin to hatakikata, how to work with foreigners in manga format. I'm actually quite looking forward to seeing this, and since I'm going to go speak an event about this book, I should probably read it. I guess it's from both perspectives. It's like having the only gaijin in the village, like I was, as well as having being in an international company, having gaijin managers. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that, and I will share that. Ami Yamato, friend of the show, I've done a couple of collab videos with her. She was featured on BBC Click. A lot of people talking about these virtual YouTubers and their claims of people being like the first virtual YouTuber before she was, when she was out, before any of them, and collabing with me on Skype conversations and stuff like that. A slightly awkward thing on the Skype collab, but glad to see that she was cool about it. But yes, that was very cool that she was featured on BBC. Yes, with the trains running longer during the Olympics, they're going to extend the running hours of the Yamanote line. Apparently, there are concerns that is going to increase the overtime that people will have to work. Yeah, that's probably a thing that will probably happen. That's coming back to the discussions we had before. This was a big deal, actually. Some Japanese banks have announced that they're going to drop the requirement of having a stamp, a Japanese seal, a personal seal, in order to open a bank account, which I must was part of the fun when I first got to Japan. I wanted to get a seal made. Although they have rules sometimes with foreigners, like with mine it had to be in katakana. Shubis. Well, I might go on vacations every now and then, but yes, we'll see. When I'm retired, I don't know. I'll live wherever is the right place to live at that time. But I'm here pretty much. So please come here and hook me up. We'll take you out for lunch or something. Banks getting rid of hankos. This was kind of a big deal, actually, and a lot of people. I tweeted this when I retweeted this article. People's minds were collectively blown. That was a big deal. Very glad to see Denki Groove, the first concert I ever went to in Japan. Awesome. Wired. You know what? I went to Wired 99. Wired 2000, was that the first one? I don't know, but Denki Groove. Anyway, awesome. And yes, the thing is, Denki Groove has two members. Takyu Ishino is the other guy. Their music is awesome. Takyu's done nothing wrong, and frankly, even like Pierre Taki, yes, he did cocaine, but the reaction about trying to embargo all of the CDs of Denki Groove was ridiculous, and it's good to see that the music companies are starting to push back and say, look, there's no crime in the music. After too many domestic abuse cases, and frankly this is another big change that's happened over the 20 years in Japan, this whole kind of softening of the society in a way, in a good way, towards the idea that, you know, you can use capital punishment against kids, against your own kids and at school. Everyone who I knew growing up had stories of, you know, horror stories from school about teachers that went too far with physical punishments, like lifting kids up by their ears until their ears got cut, and, you know, punching them, and, you know, kicking them, doing stuff that teachers shouldn't do even in a capital punishment context. And there were some parents who would do this as well, and this is the problem, because you recognize capital punishment. It's not clear to everyone where the appropriate line is, and some people clearly cross it, and there have been too many cases of this in extreme ways. It's a good sign that the society is now more open to reporting and criminalizing this behavior, and it's a reflection of that yes, indeed, the Japanese government, the LDP itself, is looking to legislate to make it illegal for parents to actually use physical violence to discipline their kids, simply because there's a growing acceptance after a couple of horrible abuse cases, when parents use that they were disciplining their kids as an excuse that you know, privileges are taken away, do it another way, which in a way puts Japan actually ahead of other countries. If they can pass this, there's going to be opposition within the LDP itself, but that's good to see. Japan, only the 58th happiest place in the world. Again, I don't know exactly what they're using to measure this. And given that the famously depressed Nordic countries are ahead, I don't know. I mean, and certainly, you know, people do not have a bright outlook for the future. There again, I'd say, you know, young people, well, I could see ways that people are happy. I think the ways that I think people are happy in Japan is if you are young and single and independent, and in a city like Tokyo, it's an unlimited place where you can do whatever you want. For anyone who's thinking about the future and about the population bubble, about the future economy, about the current economy, about the prospects of jobs, wage stagnation, and all of that sort of stuff, there's plenty of reasons to be negative as well. Seems a little bit extreme to me. I don't know. I'm happy. I made a video about it a couple of years ago, which you should watch. More things about the seal going away. The Sunwolves, the Tokyo rugby team in the Super Rugby competition that I love, has just been cut from the competition, partly because the South African teams don't like flying all the way out to Asia, and nobody wants to watch those games, so they're not getting TV ad revenue from it. At the same time, frankly, the Japanese Rugby Union as well has not really supported the idea, which is a shame. Plus, of course, the fact that they were forced to play half of their home games in Singapore and not in Japan, which meant that the real fans, the stadiums in Singapore were empty, and the real fans in Tokyo only got to see half the games, for a team that was already behind from the beginning, playing really strong teams and not allowed to play home games. That said, they've played really well this year. They've actually won some really big upset games, thanks to guys like that person, Michael Little, who was the son of All Black legend Walter Little, who also came and played in Japan. They've got some great players, a lot of great Kiwi players. They're forming into a great team, and it's a big disappointment that they're going. Interested to see what replaces it, but that was big news. 20 years straight in Japan. This was kind of interesting, the story at the top. A gay Taiwanese man was going to be deported for being overstaying his visa. It seemed pretty straightforward, except his justification for staying was his marriage relationship, or a de facto marriage relationship, to his Japanese husband. Immigration, while considering his appeal against his deportation case, has decided to withdraw the deportation order and recognize the relationship with his husband, with his Japanese husband, as approximating marriage and being entitled to remain in Japan based on a marriage relationship. Which again, very forward thinking of the Japanese immigration, that they're basically recognizing, ahead of the country formally recognizing gay marriage, although some parts of Japan have recognized in a civil sense gay partnerships or civil LGBT partnerships. Immigration has actually recognized a case of withdrawn deportation of a person basically in the situation, recognizing that the true quality of the situation was that he was a spouse of a Japanese citizen. So that's actually pretty progressive and surprising good news. So good to see. Japan has more gaijins than ever before. When I got here, there's like 1 million. Now there's 2.73 million. And remember, when we say gaijins, we're talking Vietnamese, Chinese, Koreans, Filipinos, Iranians, way down the list are English speakers, but very good to see you there. Hey, Mata Gaijinka, good to see you. Loved your track, by the way. Yes, you'll all be seeing some of the recent outputs of the Tokyo Digital Crew. Kimbiko asking about capital punishment. Well, that's what they call it in Japan. The idea capital punishment, well, not in terms of execution, in terms of physical punishments, but in New Zealand that's what we called strapping and caning kids as well, which they used to do. This week was really weird for one other thing, which is that Malala, the Pakistani, or was she Afghan or Pakistani? But anyway, a girl who campaigned for the right for girls to be educated and faced death threats and got shot at and so on, and won the Nobel Peace Prize, was it, for that, and is now studying at Oxford and has become a UN ambassador for the rights of education for women, has been travelling the world and has actually come to Japan to speak at a conference and met the Japanese Prime Minister, who said, "Isn't it wonderful, and Japan will do all that it can to help all of those other backward, horrible countries that don't allow women equal access to education." I believe that was on Wednesday that happened. On Thursday, women who announced that they were suing Tokyo Medical University because the Tokyo Medical University, Pakistani, there we go, because as I've mentioned earlier, Tokyo Medical University was decided that having women doctors was such a drag, messing up the schedules with their biology and having kids and stuff like that, that they deliberately weighted entrance exam results against women to try to reduce the number of women getting into the medical school, and instead boosting rich men basically to take their places, basically failing women who actually passed the test for entry. They've launched a class action lawsuit against the university for denying them their chance to entry into medical school, and the pain and suffering and loss of quality of life that resulted from that. And they're suing them through the nose. So ironic, the day after Abe said, "Oh, we're going to help all those backward countries that block equal access to education for women," a lawsuit against the Tokyo Medical University for blocking equal access for education for women in Japan was launched. Of course, that's not a national policy. That was a one-off case, but it's not a good look. I thought that was kind of just juxtaposing news that was kind of interesting. And yes, indeed, also the 8th anniversary, that's from last week, the 8th anniversary of the Great Japanese East Japan Earthquake. Dan H, again, don't have to worry about the super chats, but thank you for the clarification. She's a Pakistani, but ethnically Pashtun, obviously. Okay, so indeed a big ethnic minority in Afghanistan, so thank you for clarifying that. Can the medical school get criminal prosecution for fraud? Well, there's a couple of things. Now they're getting heavily investigated. There's already found that they've accepted bribes. I mean, again, we have the same thing happening in America, so it's not an exclusively Japan problem. Certainly I think they can, and it looks like they're being pretty thoroughly investigated about this, and it looks like there are going to be more consequences, and so the story's not going to end with this, but for now the direct victims are going for civil damages, which I hope they get every cent. Maybe final story, I think. Oh geez, we've got two or three more stories. Okay, one is that Japan Post is testing driverless cars, and you know what, although America's getting all the attention with the driverless car thing, I would remind everybody that America had GPS and had like satellite navigation systems for cars before Japan, but they weren't very good. When Japan developed, there's a fantastic Project X episode from the NHK documentary series about how Japan developed its first car navigation system. And the thing with the car navigation systems in Japan was, because of places like Setagaya that just have these maze-like, really narrow, horrible roads everywhere, it's so easy to get lost. It's necessary for these driving systems to be really accurate, to have a lot of information about the roads for it to be anywhere remotely useful. The sort of US-style GPS, where like they only had to be accurate to 100 meters to basically get the right place that you get outside of Japan, didn't work in Japan. They didn't work for Japanese like maze-like small narrow roads in really densely populated areas. So the episode of Project X talking about this, they tested the Japanese system for this in Setagaya every time, just to because to see if it would survive that test. And the result is that Japanese car navigation systems are way better, and they feel like they're 10 years ahead of any car navigation system I've used outside of Japan. I get really frustrated driving with car navigations outside of Japan. Not that they're perfect, but they're pretty good. I do get the feeling Japan, there's an opportunity for the same thing here with the self-driving cars. Japanese companies are kind of pottering away quietly at this, but because of the population issue and various other things, there's a huge incentive, similar to with the car navigation systems for self-driving cars, for this to really happen in Japan. And while people keep saying this is further away than you think it is, there are real problems getting to level 5 autonomy. I don't be surprised if you see them coming out of Japan first, and really cool to see that they're testing that for that. I think this might be there we go. 2 more articles left. One of cherry blossoms. They're awesome. Check out Tokyo Timeout for all the best places to go. That is a picture of Nakameguro, which is one of the best places to go. If you want to go check out Sakura, which are starting right now and will be peaking for the Hanami next week, which is going to be awesome. Check out Facebook or message me if you don't know where to go, if you can make it, because there's like 200 people confirmed to go and 1,900 people interested in going. It's going to be the biggest one ever, even though I won't be able to go until the after party, because I'll be coming back from Hakone with my dad. But this was kind of funny in a bad way. A division head, the head of wages, a civil servant working in the Ministry of Health, Labour, Welfare on a personal trip on a vacation for reasons undisclosed to South Korea, apparently got raging drunk in the airport on the way back and thought he would represent his country proudly in Korea, where of course relations with Japan are not sensitive whatsoever, by acting drunk and belligerent. And when a member of was it Korea Airlines attempted to stop him boarding the plane because he was shouting and drunk and storming around, and he tried to block him entering the plane because he was drunk. He on video, people filmed this, basically took a few kicks and punches at the employee, who was taken away by police, where when being questioned by police he helpfully clarified that he hates Korean people. I mean, he's trying to make this as bad as possible, basically. Eventually he admitted to what he did. He was promptly sent back to Japan. It's kind of funny, they are saying ex-Japan official, because he was fired 3 days after the event. He was a Japanese government official at the time that this happened, but all Japanese media is reporting this that he was an ex-official because he was dismissed. However, again, never want to let an opportunity like this go by. The Airline Workers Union is filing a lawsuit against him, and they've announced that they're taking action to one, demand that he apologise, and two, to make sure that the government strips him of his civil servant status. And I hope that they succeed. I mean, again, it's a good opportunity for them to ram home a chance to make Japan apologise again, but man, talk about doing it wrong. So yes, slightly embarrassing story to finish the evening on 20 years in Japan. Some things have changed and some things still just stay the same. What can you say? So anyway, it's been right on an hour, so I've timed the show pretty well. Look out for actually quite a lot of stuff happening. If you are in Tokyo, I will make it late. I'll tweet when I think I'm going to make it, but it'll be like 9 or 10 p.m. But I'll try to get out to the after parties to the Hanami next week, which promises to be awesome, like the best possible timing. This week on Tuesday, the final episode of this season of Japan Business Time. On April 5th, I'm going to be speaking on a panel in Tokyo at a Rochelle Cobb book event. Again, if you can come out, would love to, if you'd like to see me talking at an event, that'll be there, and it'll be a chance to meet up. If you're ever visiting Tokyo as well, don't hesitate to say, hey, can we meet up for lunch? I'm always good with that. The Sergeant Bilko, the Tokyo Digital Crew News. Well, I don't want to jinx it in a way, but with the crew has gotten back together, and we are already working on some projects together. And there are some, I think I've talked about some of the things I've quite enjoyed watching lately, and I want to do something like that. So we're putting something together that should be pretty dang awesome, and it's coming together really nice. Rochelle Book Link is actually in the Flipboard. It's right in the beginning. I will tweet it out again. I've tweeted it before, so check out too. I will actually also put it on Facebook right now after this anyway, but it is, in fact, where did I put it? Boom, 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 boom. It's in here, trust me, I showed it earlier. So yes, it's there in the Rochelle Club. It's in Japanese and it's a manga book, but it will be good. And Mata Gaijinka, you can see how excited some of the people here who are involved in the Tokyo Digital Crew project already are. It's a pretty cool project, so there's a lot of cool things going on. And that's it. 20 years, who knows how many more. Everybody have a very good week. Keep cool till after school, kakite ano. And yeah, that's pretty much it. I'll see you on Tuesday. Please join me on Tuesday night for the premiere of the final episode of the Japan Business Time for the season. And yeah, keep watching the space and look out for hopefully a big kickoff, also some big My-chan stuff during this week and certainly next week. Have a good week, everybody, especially you, Milchman 2, who I have not yet seen in the comments yet. So I'm saying hello to you now, and thanks to everybody for joining. And boom, peace. Ending the stream.